Hey, this is Mr. Herbson here. We're going to introduce you here to a new kind of problem, and you're solving this equation. It's x to the third power, and that's like a 1x, minus 6x to the second, minus 9x plus 54 equals 0. Now, here's the first thing you got to know, that if I have x to the third, there's going to be 3 answers, okay? So I need to look for 3 answers in the problem. So not only is there 3 answers, there's also 4 terms because I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So with 4 terms, you got to learn a new type of strategy, and that's called grouping, okay? Grouping. So we're going to set up this big, huge box right here, and this is how you set up grouping, just like you see on the sheet. So you're going to make parentheses plus parentheses. Then the object is we're going to pull something out of both parentheses, so there's going to be spaces, and then we're going to end up with a final space with a parentheses, and that's the idea for factor by grouping. It's called grouping. Okay, so here's what I do with this. I take 1x to the third minus 6x to the second. Okay, we put those two together. Then I put negative 9x. You got to make sure you get the negative in there, and then plus 54. Okay, then what I do is I divide, but instead of dividing all 4, I divide by 2 of them at a time. So right here, as you can see, there's no negative here, but they both have x and x. So x third, x second. We need to divide by x to the second, okay? I always divide by the lower exponent of x. And then 1 and 6 I really can't divide down. Okay, now here we have a negative right here, okay? So we need to be dividing by negative. I don't have x on both. 54 doesn't have an x, okay? So no x. So now I look at the actual numbers. I know I can't divide 1 and 6 down because 1 would be my smallest, but let's look at 9 here, okay? So factors of 9, 1 and 9, 2 is a decimal, and then 3 and 3. Now let's check out 9. So let's try to divide. I know 9 divides by 9, but what about 54? So 54 divided by 9 gives me 6, okay? So I need to use 9. Okay, so x squared comes out, and negative 9 comes out here. Okay, now I got 1. We just dropped that. Now x third divided by x second. Let me show you something here. X third means x times x times x. Divided by an x second means x times x. So when I'm dividing, I cross out common factors, and I end up with just x. Okay? So that's always going to be x. So it's 1x minus, and then 6. X second will cancel the x's there. Now, negative 9 divided by negative 9 is 1, so 1x. And 54 divided by negative 9 is negative 6, so minus 6. Okay? All right, now that we're at this point, now you're where you were yesterday. You got your plus, okay? I've got each side here. And I've got 1x minus 6 and 1x minus 6. So I will be factoring that outside. Okay, and then that leaves me with x to the power of 2 and negative 9. So x second minus 9. Now we're done with the grouping. But there's also another thing we need to look for, and that's difference of perfect squares, so DOPS, because we will have one on every problem. Okay, so minus, we have that. 6 is not a perfect square, so that's going to be, we need to circle that, okay? But right here we have a minus, and we have 3 times 3, and we have x times x. So that is a difference of perfect squares, so x plus 3 and x minus 3. Now this thing right here, we drop alongside of it, so 1x minus 6. And that is how we're going to get our three answers, okay? My factor of 1x minus 6 could equal 0. My factor of x plus 3 could equal 0. Or my factor of x minus 3 equals 0. So plus 6, I get 6. It's a 1, so there's my first solution. I minus 3, I get negative 3. And then I plus 3 and plus 3, I get positive 3. Okay, my next problem. There are going to be x third means there's 3 answers. So, okay, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, so 4 terms. Okay, so grouping. And then we're going to put spaces out there. And then I will need to decide if I have a difference of perfect squares. I think I probably will. So if I don't, I'm in a lot of trouble based on what we know now. So 1x third and 5x squared. Okay, and then, remember that's negative, so negative 16x minus 80. Okay, so 1 and 5 I can't divide down. There's no negative, but I have x third and x second, so we need to divide by x to the second. Let's look here. We have this negative, so I need to put negatives. Okay. And then 16, factors of 16, 1 and 16, 2 and 8. 3 is a decimal, and then we have twin factors of 4. So let's talk about 16. Okay. So 16 divided by 16 is 1, and 80 divided by 16 is 5. Okay, so 16 works. That's the winner. So x second pops out of there. Negative 16 pops out of there. And then I have 1. X third, x second is x. 5, and then the x seconds here cancel. And negative 16 divided by negative 16 is 1, and that's x. And then again, we divide negative 80 divided by negative 16, and that's 5. Okay, so as you can see, we have 1x plus 5 and 1x plus 5. So that's what I pull out. And then I cross those out, and I end up with x second and negative 16. Put minus 16, though. Okay, so I circle this. That won't be a difference of perfect squares, but that one probably is because it's 4 times 4, and that's x times x. So x plus 4, x minus 4. Now this one here, I drop down, so 1x plus 5, because that's still a factor that I haven't broken down, so it's part of the expression. Okay, so 1x plus 5 equals 0. X plus 4 equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. So 1x equals negative 5. There's your first answer. X equals negative 4. There's your second answer. And x equals 4. There's my third answer. Okay, my next problem. There are 3 answers again and 4 terms. So, grouping. So, it'd be kind of neat with how you set it up too. If you need a bigger box, that's fine. Okay, so I put 1x to the third plus 1x to the second, and then negative 16x minus 16. Okay, so I don't have a negative. I can't really divide 1 and 1 down, but I do have x third and x second, so we always are going to divide by x second on those two things. Okay, so I have a negative in front, And if I have the same number, just divide by that number, 16, okay? So x second is pulled out, and negative 16 is pulled out. So it's going to give me 1, and x third, x second is x, plus 1, and those cancel. That's going to be 1, and then the x, negative 16 divided by negative 16 is plus 1. So 1x plus 1, 1x plus 1, we pull that out. And then I have x second and negative 16. And now I need to look for a difference of perfect squares, because anytime we factor by grouping, we have to keep our eye on that. Okay, that's not, so I circle that, but this is, because we have 4 times 4 and x times x. So x, 4, 4. So I take that and drop it down. Okay, so I'm going to take 1x plus 1, go ahead and set that equal to 0. X plus 4, set that equals 0. X minus 4, that equal to 0. So I get negative 1, negative 4, and positive 4. Okay, then my last problem I'm going to do, there's 3 answers with 4 terms. So grouping is the go-to when there's 4 terms. And then dops. Okay, so we got 2x to the third minus 3x to the second, and then negative 18x plus 27. Okay. Okay, negative, don't have it, but I do have x's, x third, x second. 2 and 3 I can't really divide down. Okay, so I do have a negative here. Okay, so 18. I've got 1 and 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 18 divided by 3 is 6. 18 divided by 4 is a decimal. Divided by 5 decimal, and then I'm back to 6, so I'm good. So let's check out 18. So 18 divided by 18, 27 divided by 18. That's not going to work because that's 1.5, so we have to go to my next number and see if that will work. Next biggest factor of 18. So 18 divided by 9, that's a good. 27 divided by 9, that's good. So 9 is kind of the go-to here. So x second, negative 9, and then we're going to get 2x minus 3. And that's going to be 2x minus 3. Okay, so 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3. X second minus 9. And that is not, that's prime. That's a prime expression. We don't factor that down, but this is not prime because I know that that's 3 times 3 and x times x. So I know that would be x plus 3 times x minus 3. Okay, and then I bring down 2x minus 3, and I'm ready to solve. I know that 2 times x minus 3 can equal 0. I know that x plus 3 can equal 0. And I know x minus 3 can equal 0. Now we're going to get a little decimal here because I end up having to divide by 2, so that's 1.5. Now I can get decimals for the end answer, I just don't want them in the factoring procedure. It's the definition of a factor is something that will not get a decimal. Okay, I hope that made sense. That's what I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and let me know if you guys have any problems.